to you about the accounting localizations. The title of this talk is the evolution of the accounting localization, and it's kind of a little trick to be able to talk about things that haven't been implemented yet. So, and that can give you an idea about where we are heading as Odoo. I hope it will be interesting to you. Why do we have these accounting localizations? So you have all these L10N modules in the source code. When you have looked into the source code, you will certainly have seen them. Well, first reason is the chart of accounts. So imagine you are doing a demo for an accountant or an accounting firm, and you show them everything in Odoo, but you show it with the wrong chart of accounts. I can tell you that that demo will not be successful, because the accountant will say, no, this thing does not work. My account 4 needs to be in 5 and 6 needs to be in 3. So he will not like it. So we have to, as Odoo, we already need to provide a chart of accounts with the right accounts, the right taxes, and so on for every country. We don't have it for every country, but at least we should try. But that's one thing, and another reason is actually all the legal requirements, and also the practices that are done in certain countries. Certain countries use a certain payment reference, or have certain specific reports. Actually, all countries have almost their own VAT return. So yeah, we have the Eurostat reports and so on, but we'll talk about them. And then in the audit files and electronic invoicing are new. They are things where we see that the government wants to know more and more about your financial about your financial situation, and yeah, they are new, and we will also talk about them. And the audit files are like an entire export of your accounting. But let's start with the COA itself, and in the chart of accounts, how do you create them? So I will talk to you how it's built up. You don't need to be a developer to understand what's in there, because it's all XML and CSV. It's data. You can also, there's also one in the user documentation. You will also find a good topic about how you create your localization. So we define the chart of accounts in XML. That's the first thing that happens in such a module. And it's good to know that chart templates can have children. So it does not happen a lot. Most localizations only have one chart of accounts. But for example, for Spain, you have one very simple one for really little companies, and then a little bit bigger companies use the same accounts but need some accounts extra. And that way you can use the parent-child relationship to accomplish that. You'll see also that here we cannot already put the accounts in there because they haven't been defined yet. So we have the prefixes, and actually when you install the chart of accounts, it will automatically create a bank account that starts with 550. Of course, we need to set a currency, and the spoken languages is only when you go multi-language. In Belgium, we have that case because we have the northern Dutch part and the southern French part, and so we need to add. So there are multiple languages that can be used legally, but most localizations are actually put in the language of the country itself. So they only have Lithuanian, for example. You define this chart of accounts, and now we will define all the contents of the chart of accounts, and then afterwards we will need to redefine that chart of accounts again. So what's in a chart of accounts? You have the the accounts, of course, itself, and we put them in CSV. Why in CSV? Because they are because CSV loads a lot faster, and we have a couple of hundreds of them. So, but if the structure is more complicated, like in the case of taxes, we put them as an XML. You will see that there is a difference between templates for and no templates for. And that's because actually we define account templates, because when we install the chart of accounts, we will instantiate, we will copy those objects into accounts. And that is because of being able to support multi-company. So that way you can install 2 Belgian companies in the same database, but for example, one will keep the standard chart of accounts from the localization, and the other one will have to add some accounts. And that way the user, it's still upon the user to make sure that his chart of accounts is towards his requirements. So let's start with the accounts. They are defined in the CSV. You see this really ugly on the right side, but you can actually just open it in a spreadsheet. The first column is the ID. In Odoo we use the XML ID. We were talking about copying from template to and instantiating them. There is some kind of mechanism where the XML ID of the instance is like 8000 underscore and the ID of the company. So it can be handy in certain cases. Then you have the code of the account. That's what's mostly used to identify them. Then the user type, and the user type is really important, because please only use the user types that we have in Odoo. Lately, we also added off-balance user type, so it's possible to use always the types that are in Odoo already. Of course, you need to link them to the chart templates and the tags. That's when you have your custom reports, then you can use the tag. So if you don't have enough with the user type, don't worry, you can put everything, link everything to a tag, and in your reports you can ask for the right journal entries that have a certain tag linked to the account. Then we have the taxes. Here we define them in XML, and that's basically because we have here the invoice repetition lines. And those were introduced in version 13. Olivier Colson gave a really good talk about that last year. And yeah, this is actually done for also intra-community, and to make it easier for the user to understand what's the link between the taxes and the tax report. Also beware that the first tax you define for sale, or the first tax that you define for purchase, will be the tax that is used by default. So it's the most easy thing to understand this XML is actually just configure a tax in Odoo, and then you will see that there is a base amount that can be reported on a certain report line. And there is also a tax amount with a certain account. And this is also in handy. You can have -100 for all the intra-community cases. And that way, this is a simpler method than we had before. But the groups of taxes actually still exist. Then the fiscal positions. Fiscal positions are used to map accounts or taxes. That's their main goal. Within the country, normally nothing will change. So you have a product. For example, you define 21% VAT on that product. But when you, in certain cases in Europe, you need to apply that intra-community tax, and in that case, the system can see, okay, I will not use that 21%, but I will use the tax plus 21 minus 21. Yeah, these things can also be auto-applied. So we improved a lot lately the way in which these fiscal positions are auto-applied. So you have first the country, then the European union, and then the export one. And you can also take into account if it was VAT required or not. So these things work, and we updated them for France and so on. I can imagine that you say, okay, it does not always depend on the country. For example, for India, we had the case where it depends on the states in between, and also depends on your state and so on, and that's a lot more complicated. And yeah, we have to see in the future how we will deal with that. It's possible that we will put more VAT numbers on the company or on the partners. We'll see how that will end up. Then we have the reconciliation models. These are also called the matching rules. So when you pay something and afterwards you have your bank statements, or when you get paid and you have the bank statements, then you want to match, you want to see what corresponds to what. And in order to do that, you have an automatic system. So we try to automatize that with those matching rules. And they are less common in the localizations because you can easily create them yourself. But there have been some improvements lately. And for example, for the partner matching, you don't always have, for example, in the United States, you don't always have that much information into your bank statement lines, and that's why we allow to also search for the corresponding partner through the information that is elsewhere. For example, in the description of the bank statement line, and this allows for far better matching. It's also possible that you need to give another partner instead of the partner that's linked to the bank account. The performance has also improved there for the reconciliation lately. Because we treat rule by rule and not everything at once in one big SQL query. There's also something about the end date that we don't try to take everything into account from the beginning of times, and that can also improve performance. And and there is also something about payments and bank statements that I want you to know. And it has been refactored. In V13, we had refactoring about the account invoices that also became actually an account move, that unify of both. And this makes sure that you don't have any redundancy of information, so that the information is only at one place and not at 20 at the same time. And we did the same with payments and bank statement lines, because payments have now an inheritance from account move, and bank statement lines also have an inheritance from account move, and this has improved a lot in the consistency of the code, and in the meantime a lot of bugs were solved. Then the account groups. What are account groups? These are for aesthetical purposes. So you can have a report, and when you have an account in the report, we actually in our localizations we only put the accounts that are at the leaves of the tree, and where you put the accounting entries. But the accountant wants to know a bit the structure of the tree above, and that's why we added these account groups. They were actually done by Pedro Baeza, and that was his idea at the time, I think, or he pushed for it. And in V14, we also made account group. They also became a template. And here it's interesting because the code that you see, so you see the prefix and you see the prefix start and prefix end. And when you have an account with a certain code, automatically there is a field group ID that is compute store true read-only false, which actually by default is the calculated group based on that prefix. So if you have 1001, it will be in group 100, and that will be calculated automatically, but because of this feature of the ORM, you can still change that value. Then we have the tags. I talked about that in the account. For the accounts, you have tags to link them to the reporting, but you have also the same system for taxes. The only thing that you need to be careful there is to link them to a certain country. And then there's one thing left, and that's the tax group. And the way to explain that can be done easiest by this screenshot where you see that the tax groups are actually what you see underneath the total here. So this is a tax group, and so all the tax amounts, so you have the untaxed amounts, and all the taxed amounts are actually grouped by, it's called amounts by group, this function. It's done through this JavaScript, but called in Python. And here you, so by defining this and linking this tax to this group, it will group them like this. You can, normally per percentage, we only have one group, except maybe for the 0% where you can have exempt, really 0%, that kind of stuff. And so once we have defined all of this, we can redefine the chart of accounts, but this time we define also the accounts that are the receivable account, the payable accounts, and so on. And yeah, afterwards there is still a try loading that when you install the localization, that it would automatically install if there is no chart of accounts yet in your current company. And that way, at least, you have already all the data in your system. But we need to be able to put them into reports to be useful for our financial directors and for the accounting managers. And let's start with the first one. This is the financial report. It's used for the profit and loss and the balance sheet. You see here that we define it here with a name, belong, which is balance sheet, and also a date range, which is false. So you can apply all kinds of filters on the HTML report already. We only have one date for the balance sheet. For the profit and loss, we need a date range. Yeah, and then in order to understand the lines themselves, you see that they link between each other. So this one has the financial report itself, and this one depends on another line. So you have a hierarchy of different lines. In order to understand how this report works, look here at the domain. You will see that you have the accounts that have the code that starts with 23. And yeah, this is good for accountings for countries where the chart of accounts has really fixed code, and it's almost legally determined what goes where. But there are countries where it's not the case, and you can always go back fall back on the tags that we saw earlier linked to the account as well. So you can say tag IDs in. This formula has been simplified, so you just take the sum. And yeah, it's possible that you will have another line that says, okay, that's the sum of B23 plus B24. And that's why you need this code. You also see that you have the group by. That's when you decollapse, it will group by account. So that's for the financial reports. And just to tell you that I'm not lying, to show you that I'm not lying, this is one. This is the balance sheet for Belgium, where you also see that you have a sum and the different elements. Then we have the tax reports. They are new from version 13. And in version 14, it's also possible to create tax report for multiple countries. So we also have the account tax report object. Here, the domain is not the domain anymore, but there is the tag name. And that's actually the link you will see in the tax grid on the configuration of the tax. And the tax form will have this name. It will be +00 or -00. And so this is how we define how the tax reports and the taxes are linked. And yeah, actually a lot of countries, as I said before, have this tax report and this VAT return, like it's often called. And we have only one menu item with the VAT report, with the tax report, and it will automatically adjust according to the country of your company. Yeah, I am putting dynamic reports, but it's a bit of a misleading title. Actually, those financial reports are cool, but sometimes they are just not good enough. Actually, a lot of times, often, or at least a lot of partners think that they need to create a custom report again, and that means inheriting the account report, putting the different filters, and then inheriting get lines. And inheriting get lines is a lot of work. So you need to define the entire dictionary that will be passed to the web client, actually, and that will render all the elements in the report. It's not that good. Another way, actually, is to define a SQL view. But the problem with the SQL view, well, the advantage of the SQL view is that you don't have to define all the different filters anymore. So you don't need to say, if I filter on all entries, then add this in my SQL query or in my Python logic. So yeah, either we created a view and the filters were automatically applied, either we need to do everything from scratch and then do it ourselves. And that's what's good now with the new thing, what I called the dynamic reports, is that you can actually combine both good things. So you have you define the SQL, but you can define it not like a view and a static. You can define it already with some parameters in it. And this has become the accounting report. And we have already adapted this for the multi-currency revaluation report, as you can see here. And we will also, it's also done for the partner balance. And we are checking if there are other reports that we can change in the same way. We have a lot of VAT Intrastat reports. There's one for Belgium, there's one for Luxembourg, and actually I think a lot of countries need them, the Netherlands as well, so often also with an export and so on. And it's not because I say in the slides it's about the future that we don't have them already. The future is that we will try to have a common module and to reuse the code and to clean that out, so that maybe for a certain country we just need to add a field somewhere, but we can reuse the same code. And then we have the audit files. These are an entire export of your accounting. It's often meant, for example, in Luxembourg, for an accountant. When he gives it to the government can put it in their system and check all the accounts without needing to go to you and asking you for all the papers. So, and this is based on the SAFT 2.0 standard. we saw we had two cases, one in Luxembourg and one in Norway. And there are more cases. Poland has GPK, Portugal has something, Lithuania and so on. But we saw that they had a common standard. So SAFT 2.0 is a standard. So we thought we will do the best we can to put it to an account SAFT module. And you can see here in the code as well. For example, for Norway, this is pretty straightforward because there are not a lot of changes. So this just adds the get reports button is just to add a button on the general ledger where you can do the export. We have the prepare header data, and there you see that we need to add two things. We see that XSD is a little bit different, and you need to recuperate the XSD file. And yeah, that way we have adapted the SAFT standard for Norway. And Luxembourg is a bit more complicated. Norwegians tend to follow the standard more. And what I want to say about this as well is that we see in a lot of exports and also in electronic invoicing with the taxes that they are asked in a way that is very detailed. We have on our invoice line, we have a method compute all, which will compute all the different taxes. So if you have multiple taxes on one line, it will say, okay, this is the base for this tax and so on, to have the entire detail. However, we don't store all that detail, but we see that we need them for export, we need them for electronic invoicing. So in the future, we are thinking about how can we put that maybe in a data model and generalize the calculation of the taxes, which could also solve other problems with global rounding, make sure that they are the same among all the different models and so on. And also something we are working on is a generic import strategy. So we actually import WinBooks exports, but we will do the same for other things like SAFT here. So if you have another ERP system or accounting system and it exports SAFT 2.0, no problem, you just import it into Odoo, and you don't need to have different systems anymore between one for inventory and one for accounting. Now you just do everything in Odoo, of course. And some specific practices can be interesting. I talked about payment reference. We did this code was done together with Daniel Stenloff from Sweden. And the payment reference, when you make a customer invoice and you validate it, at that moment it will put a reference that you will use later to reconcile the payments of your customer. And this is a system. In Sweden this happens with special codes. In Finland we have them as well. In Norway you have the KIT. In Belgium you have something with something the structured communications. And this allows to automatically put one either based on the partners or based on the specific invoice. What you need to do is to add an option in the selection on the journal, and you need to implement the corresponding methods. Often we need to add also a custom field. So for example, here in India, we need a GST treatment on the account invoice. Account move now. And what's important here to consider is that if you add a field somewhere, that if you are having an invoice from another company, that you are not disturbed by this field. That's why we add everywhere this country code and this ATTRS invisible. In the future, we are also thinking to do that on partners and products. It's more difficult there because the company ID is not required, and they are shared among the different companies and a multi-company environment. But we are talking to the people of the ORM to find a proper solution over there. And I want to talk a bit about future practices as well. It happens that partners come to us with, I have this special thing. For example, we have a lot of demand for withholding tax on payments. It's not the same as just withholding tax adding to your invoice, because it does not change your invoice, but it does change the way the payment is happening. And we don't have actually, we can easily hack a solution. We can also, partners have already a bit of nicer solutions for this, but we are really thinking about how can we do this in the most user-friendly way in Odoo, and not just something that's a hack for one country, and another country it's a bit different, and another country a lot different. We want to search for a generic answer where we can apply it to everyone, and that it's also user-friendly. But we will have to search for a solution for this. So it's not because you have a problem, and often in Odoo we say no, that we don't think about it and are thinking about solutions. Portugal is also such an example where they need really to certify the software and so on, and we need to search for really the simplest solution we can think of to keep the flexibility there is in Odoo. But yeah, I hope that we will still talk to those partners about that problem as well. So, and then we have the electronic invoicing. A lot of governments really impose legally to do electronic invoicing now. It's more and more the case. And these ask for even more data. So we will add a lot of fields on the taxes on the invoice to be able to supply all the correct data to the government. But let's start with the naive way, and what we did before. That's just put a FactorX document in a PDF, and maybe your client will capture the PDF and see that there is an XML in there, and you will you'll have the simple version of the EDI. We saw that we also have other formats, and in Belgium we have the old UBL, and from that we said, okay, but if you have all these formats, maybe the user wants to choose which format he wants to send to his client. So we did that actually on the journal, and there is a common module now, the account EDI, which has on the account move as the EDI document ID, so you can add as many documents as you want. We will also make sure that you can import those formats as well as do the export. And this module is like a groundwork for plenty of other localizations modules. So you can see here on the journal that you can choose the format you want. CFDI is for Mexico, and here you have the payment reference we were talking about before, just to let you know. But this can go a lot farther. Mexico is actually not a simple localization. It really sends through web services the invoice to the government, and it even does that with payments. But you can see here that the EDI, all the follow-up has been integrated into this common module. This, however, has only been done for Mexico, a bit because we are opening a new office over there. You see here that there is one common state. We have something for the errors. We can check if it's for web services. We can sometimes you don't want to show the cancel button on the invoice, because in certain cases you don't want, if it has been approved by the government, you don't want the user to cancel it anymore. And so this account EDI module is like a common framework that we try to implement. In the future, we are going to use for that a queue manager, and this because now when we send invoices. Either they are done immediately when you post, or they are done through a cron. And so every night, for example, it checks all the invoices that are in the to send state and they are sent. But we don't want to have those both systems anymore. We want to have one system where we can say send it immediately, but at the same time we don't want it to stall the validation of the invoice, because sometimes you need to validate a lot of invoices and you don't want that to be stalled by the processing of sending those to the government. And that's why we are thinking about a job queue, a queue manager that allows to put different jobs in there and tries to process them as fast as possible. So this account EDI module is up for improvement in V15. I have had the chance to work with a lot of partners to implement the EDIs for Chile, Argentina, and Peru, and also we updated Colombia. And yeah, this has been a really interesting work. They are not that simple, these localizations, although it stays about sending an invoice to the government. For example, but these have all been implemented still without this account EDI, and we will adapt them in the future. Maybe for Chile, I'm working with Daniel Blanco, and the Chilean localization is actually quite interesting because it's not only sending to the government, but you also receive the invoices, your vendor bills. And when you receive the vendor bill, you can actually say if you accept or reject them. And that way you also don't need some kind of cancel mechanism. So it's a really nice way to do that. Then Argentina is when you post, you immediately send and you immediately get the answer. They don't really have an XML format, but all kinds of different web services. And you immediately get an answer about if the invoice is accepted or not. For Peru, there are different ways to send it to the government, and we actually have an IAP server because normally you need to pay something to some kind of service, and we integrate some IAP service, which makes it interesting to send. Makes it really easy to send your invoices. In the worst case, you need to pay something to the IAP service, but that really goes within Odoo, and you don't have to configure all things in another system. Everything can work automatically. Also there, yeah, it takes some time before the invoice is approved. So you send it to the government, and it's only after a while that the government will tell you, okay, it's approved or not. And in that case, there is also a way to cancel invoice. So you see different kinds of flows. For Colombia, we work with the third party still. Yeah, what I want to say about working together with partners is that it's not an easy job. Daniel Blanco from Chile, Adok from Argentina, Nomar and Peru, maybe less, but they already had their solution in V12, V11 already deployed with clients. And even there, in order to make a module standard in Odoo, there is a lot of work to do, and we have had quite some time where we had debates about how to implement certain features. For example, in Argentina and Chile and the LATAM countries, you not always have just the VAT number, but sometimes you identify the customer by their passport number or their identity card. And for that, we said, okay, what are we going to do about it? Let's build a common module, LATAM base. We also implemented the debit notes as an extra module because it's really a feature that's used there, but it's also used in other places in the world. so that you can just install it with a module. So at every time when we are talking about features, we need to be really careful. How are we going to implement them? And yeah, and that's what I wanted to say with the community. You are probably working sometimes on the localization, sometimes something is missing and we'll need to add a report. Maybe we'll work together with other partners. Maybe at a certain point we will talk to Odoo. And I think with this, you know that in order to have a good line in this, it's not that easy. But there is a way to do this, and I think if we do it, in any case, if there are partners that are enduring in this, I think it's a good way to actually grow together, and it's good for Odoo, it's good for the partner, and it's showing that humanity can work together to achieve great things. What we will be obliged as humanity to do. I want to thank you, and if there are any questions, now is the time to ask them.
Thank you, Jos, for your insightful talk on the evolution of accounting localizations. We have a couple of questions here asked by the viewers. Thank you very much for those. Please keep on asking your questions. We will go through them at a time. But here are already some that were raised during your talk. There's a question on the accounting localizations for Philippines. Is there one existing right now? If not, what does someone who wants an accounting localization for Philippines need to do in order to bring that forward?
Yeah, we don't have one right now, so it's one that's missing, and it's certainly something that we can add to the. That would be nice to have it as well. We worked on neighboring countries, Indonesia and so on. Singapore, we have something. But yeah, if you want, like some people make a pull request. I saw a pull request passing by for the Cisco HADA countries. We already have one localization. That's a bit the pity, but it should be updated. So it's good that we have. That people do this, because yeah, later on we can contact them and see what's the best solution in that case. Yeah, but you were yeah, and for the Philippines, yeah, they can also make their contributions. Of course, we can work. They can contact their sales. Who can contact the product owner? Yeah, that's also a way. They can try, as they saw this talk, they can try to create a localization themselves and make the pull request. Yeah, I also saw that there was some questions about 12, 13, and 14. Yeah, as you saw in the presentation, there are some difference between 12 and 13. Namely, the taxes definition has changed a lot. So yeah, you need to adapt to that. It's not because you have sometimes people made a module in version 8 and they suppose that it will. It needs some adapting, and it's good to revise it thoroughly to make sure people can use it in the right way. Of course, this does not mean that people in the Philippines cannot use Odoo. They can always import their accounts themselves, create the reports themselves, and the interface. But as I said in the beginning, it's really important that an accountant can use his accounts and not. And that when he starts with Odoo, that someone who demos, for example, can immediately show the accounts of the Philippines.
Yeah. Okay, I think that is a very clear answer. Thank you very much. We have another question on the multi-company usage of a chart of accounts. The question is, a multi-company of the same country where they use the same chart of account template. How do you manage different account groups when loading the template in a new company if they have the same prefix?
Well, yeah, the question is confusing to start with.
Okay.
There is but it's probably because the account groups work in a different way in version 13 as in version 14. So in version 13, all the account groups were shared among all the companies. And in version 14, we have account group templates that come from the localization module, and that when you install the chart of account, will create account groups for the company itself. And in that case, the mechanism that I explained, where the account will look at the code and will say, okay, it's 1, 2, 3. It starts with 1, 2, 3. So I know that this account needs to be connected with this account group. Should apply automatically between those.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that answers the questions. Otherwise, we can see each other later.
There's also a possibility, I will mention that again, to join a room together with Jos to follow up on this Q&A session. And there's also a continuous room available for accounting localizations in the community tab.
Yeah.
The next question we have received is, give me just a second, is from Andrea Cometa. What about the Italian electronic invoice?
Well, the status of the Italian electronic invoice is that we have implemented a year ago already the mail system of the Italian electronic invoice, but let's start with the fact that you can export and import Faturapa XML in Odoo. That shouldn't be a problem. And that's also, if you need more information, you can also extend that, for example. So we have the export-import. We also have the mail system, but that's not, we see that we have some clients, but it's not, we see there is some resistance in the usage of that, and we have already been looking at other solutions like Aruba, like connecting with the government, but like sometimes we see that it's not that easy, and for us because of formalities. I mean, if you want to connect with the Italian government through the web services, you need a certificate. You need, you need and I tried with my Belgian ID, but that did not work out. But yeah, I'm talking about getting a test environment. I mean, for testing with the government, and so these are the kinds of things where we can use the community a lot. I see also that if we talk with Italian partners, that they have a lot of different solutions sometimes, and I can only ask to try to try. But the ideal would be that you log into the SaaS in Odoo, and you just when you validate an invoice, it's immediately at the Italian government without having to configure an account everywhere somewhere else, for example. We see that, and in a lot of countries, that is not. It does not always go that way. We see, for example, for Chile, that we need a lot of certificates and a lot of things to be able to connect. And sometimes it's the small practice of the partner that can just help us to get us up and running with the Italian localization. And because I have also heard a lot of people telling, oh, it's it's complicated, and you need this, you need to be certified for this and for that. It can be the case, but we see that in a lot of cases there is a way, because what we do is just making the connection, and there is a way to find a solution even. But we can use help for the Italian localization. There have been, and it's difficult to find the right information sometimes. And that's where we really can use every feedback.
That's the key takeaway for our community, that we keep needing your help, especially on the testing side of things when it comes to the release of new localization related features. There's another question. From Yannick Voucher about the slide account EDI plus WS. You mentioned a queue manager. Have you considered to look at the OCA queue module that extend the API to have queue jobs?
It's not my piece of cake, the queue manager. It's originated from, and that happens a lot, that functionalities originate from the localization modules, because we find that people need things, and then we need to see how do we do it in generic. And the queue manager is a solution for the fact that we have a lot of that when you post an invoice, you want the posting of the invoice, validation of the invoice to be fast, but in the meantime, and that way you don't immediately make the connection to the web service, but you give it to the queue, to the job queue, to make it as fast as possible. And I don't know, I don't think the other team went really deep into that module, but I suppose they will have looked at the basic principles of it. The idea is afterwards to process that job as fast as possible. But yeah, we want to find also a simple solution there, and they use something with buses and but yeah, it's an asynchronous thing where you send it there and it takes care of the job. Yeah, and it's a nice, but it's not there yet because we had hoped already to have it, but it's not there yet. So we still, but it will be there in V15, that's for sure. And there's certainly interesting to make a comparison, and I think I will have to think well about how it works, because it will have implication. As I said, the flows in every localizations are a bit different, and it can have implications in how the jobs are executed.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. There's a question about the Israeli localization and what's the status of that currently?
I have been working a lot on it together with Leyline, and what I said in my talk is simply that we were stuck on the withholding on payments, and that's what we need to find a good usable solution for, and that way we will clean up everything and have good localization for Israel as well. That's the idea. But we need that first. We need to have a good idea about that feature first, because I was talking about that with Israel, and also we see that something similar happens in Argentina and Ecuador and in Belgium for the intellectual property rights. So yeah, so that's an example that I gave before about how you try to find a generic solution for a problem that happens in multiple countries.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a general question on how we acquire requirements and how we update them. In this case, it is about France. How is it handled? How are the legal certification of the software requirements handled by Odoo? Is it taken care of by Odoo or a partner? So that's how I understand the question. If a software requires a legal certificate, how is that being ensured? Is that being done by us ourselves or a partner in that case?
The account FAQ module is an older thing, so I'm not 100% aware about what's the. But as I know, you can just download the certificate from the Odoo server, and I think it comes from us. Yeah.
Okay. The Visti Christensen asked who to contact if we want to discuss changes to the Danish localization. Maybe that comes back to your original comment.
So you can create a pull request, and you can, of course, we have a new PO right now, Benjamin Signon, who you can contact.
Yeah, couple us up. Yeah.
Yeah, through your sales, for example, he can see if what you're telling makes sense, and from there we can work further. And of course, you can always make pull requests. Ping us on the pull request, and we will certainly have a look.
Okay.
There will be more people for the localizations than before.
So we have 1 minute left. Yeah. I go through the last questions here. Question from Daniel Blanco. Are we going to change the fiscal position to apply it when the invoice entry is already created?
Yeah. There is no immediate plan for that.
Okay.
But, it's something I hear people are struggling with, and it will go through feedback, and we will have to see how we
analyze if it's viable.
But yeah, maybe the fiscal position in its whole will need changes also. So it's there are a lot of things to think about. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. There's no more time for questions in this Q&A session, but there's a possibility to join a room right after this Q&A session with Joss. The link to which will be posted here in the chatter of this video. There's also a permanent localization accounting room available. You can check that on the Odoo website of the event on the tab community, and you will find it there. There is Joss and his colleagues will be available for questions for you throughout this event.
Yeah.